Our party is encumbered by an inconsistent approach to freedom.
Freedom. All Americans support freedom in principle, but conservatives don't want you to be free to gamble.
Gambling just has negative consequences.
Conservatives don't want people to be free to take drugs.
Young adults who use marijuana.
And when the Supreme Court gave gay people freedom to marry, conservatives were not happy.
Today's decisions are offensive.
It's a sad day for America.
You want to police the world.
Conservatives want a bigger military.
We're not doing this for them. We're doing it for us.
Conservatives want stronger border patrols, and many want limits on trade. When I criticized that, one conservative said this about me.
What a self-important ass.
We libertarians want government to leave us alone, even if we make choices others disagree with.
My moral choices really are on me.
That does not sit well with conservatives.
This strain of libertarianism, I think, is a very dangerous thought.
Libertarians versus conservatives. That's our show tonight.
And now, John Stossel.
The biggest threat to America's future is big government. Most conservatives and libertarians agree about that. Our $17 trillion debt may crush us. But politicians promise to spend more. When they're not spending your money, they pass more rules, strangling freedom and probably killing economic growth. Most libertarians and conservatives agree that government should stop trying to micromanage the economy, that America should allow people to drill for oil, have religious freedom, free speech, and a more limited welfare state, because private charity is better. Great. Glad we agree. But when it comes to foreign policy and personal freedoms, libertarians and conservatives differ often. Most conservatives oppose gay marriage. They want gambling banned, as well as assisted suicide and designer babies. I'll cover that in a future show. But probably the biggest, clearest difference is that we libertarians think the war on drugs is just nuts. So let's start there. Congressman Allen West is a proud conservative. He looks like one on the cover of his book. In your book, you say our republic cannot survive if we continue to abdicate the freedom to choose. Yet by banning intoxicants, you take away people's freedom to choose.
Well, you're probably not talking to the best of guys here, because I have never smoked or drank in my life, and I spent 22 years in the military.
I think you're a good conservative to talk to then about it.
And I spent 22 years in the military.
You made a personal choice to do that.
Absolutely. And so if someone wants to make a personal choice that they want to do X, well, then that's fine as long in their realm. But I forget the Supreme Court justice who said that your right to throw a punch ends at my nose.
So I can shoot heroin in my home? That should be legal?
No, I am very concerned, because this is what ends up happening. Then someone's going to come to the government and say, well, now you need to have these type of programs to take care of the drug addicts and provide them what have you.
But that's like saying we got to ban fatty meat because somebody might come to the government.
Well, there are some things that I think are very detrimental to the individual, which in turn are detrimental to the society. When you talk about liberties and freedoms, and this kind of goes back to Hobbes and his state of nature and things that this is talking about, you got to make sure that there's a level of personal responsibility that is there as well. And I believe that my point is that the federal government is allowing people to be, less and less responsible by saying that we'll take care of it.
But when you say personal responsibility, how is it personal responsibility if government bans something?
Well, that's because we have people that don't want to accept that personal responsibility. Look.
Right.
I was the designated driver for most of my second lieutenant buddies. Their choice was that, hey, Alan, I want to go out, I want to have a good time. Will you take care?
Their choice was to drink.
Absolutely.
And if somebody else wants to snort cocaine, why do you want to stop them?
Well, I think that that's a detriment to the society. I mean, what is the gain? What is the long-term gain of snorting cocaine? Now, I would
want to do it. Don't they own their own bodies?
Okay, then if you want to do it, then do it in your own sphere. But when you are now coming
You'd be fine with that being legal?
I mean, you got it here in New York City. I know doggone well that there are executives, there are people. We just saw the film Wolf of Wall Street and what he was doing. Now, if you're an adult, If you can make that decision, you can be responsible for that decision, then fine. But I don't want to...
What do you mean fine? It's illegal. You would lock people up for that.
I don't want to be the one responsible for something that happens. I don't want to be the one responsible. I don't want to be the one that suffers the consequences of John Stossel out high on cocaine and then I lose my life because of it. That's why we have laws. What you are doing can have an effect upon me, and that's where I think we have to be adult. That's where we think we have to be smart, and we have to have rules and regulations that
We can punish people for reckless driving or for somebody who gets high and injures someone. But why is the getting high itself illegal?
I think that is a overall concern of, really what is the detriment to an individual. Look, you see people all of a sudden talking about sugary sodas and everything like that. I believe that you...
Same question.
I believe that you have a government that is really getting into the overreach of trying to, manage and modify.
Why is that overreach but a law against heroin not?
Because I think that heroin is a different type of substance than me going down and having a big gulp soda.
You never even drank because...
I never saw my parents drink. And that was just how I was
Never
raised.
Curious? Do you never want to alter your consciousness through a drug, get a buzz?
I kind of like being responsible and being able to make the right decisions in my life.
Do you fault those who do think they're doing something?
No, I don't. That's why I was a designated driver for my friends in the military.
Would the founders have wanted bans on drugs?
Well, the founders were out there. They were, drinking, throwing back whiskey, ad nauseum, ad infinitum.
They were. The bar tab for a party for George Washington days before they signed the Constitution included 54 bottles of Madeira, 60 bottles of claret. It's more than 2 bottles of wine for every delegate. They were getting wasted.
They were. But this is what, I like your thing, libertarians versus conservatives. Let's find out where we do agree. Because I think the one thing that we can come to agreement on is that progressive socialism is bad for the country in total.
We agree on that.
Being at the tax issue, being at the freedom issue, liberty issue.
We should be able to pay whoever we want, how much we want, hire who we want, speak freely, keep most of what we earn, raise our kids the way we want to. Libertarians and conservatives agree.
And I think we believe in opportunity for ourselves and for our future generations, not people that want to dictate outcomes. And I think that's where big government has gone.
So let me pick on the differences. Should people be allowed to gamble?
I think they should. If you want to go out and gamble, that's your money. Okay, why should Alan West tell you, John Stossel, what to do with your money?
That's libertarian.
Now, if all of a sudden you go out and get yourself in financial debt because of your own gambling,
it's my problem.
Dadgum right.
Gay marriage?
I'm for civil unions.
So marriage for man and a woman, civil unions for others. Burn a flag?
I got problems with that, because my
Stop free speech?
Look, I got problems with that. That flag, as I saw draped over my father's coffin, will be over mine, will be over my brother's. I got a problem with that.
I have a problem with it too, but I say it should be legal. Thank you, Alan West. Now, another form of recreation where libertarians and conservatives usually do not agree, not in the case of Alan West, gambling. I like to bet. I play poker, and I'll bet with friends on most anything. Baseball games, an election, which way a ball will roll. Fortunately, such bets between friends are legal in my state, but organized sports betting is banned. Online gambling and most organized casino games are banned. In some states, even bets between friends are against the law. That ban's rarely enforced, but Americans can be jailed for betting. The bans exist because many people consider gambling a sin. And some people are hurt by gambling. Some bet the house and lose it. Bill O'Reilly gives me a hard time because I defend gambling.
You can get addicted to it. It's fun. All right, you play games.
I should outlaw fun.
And you can lose the rent money. It's almost like narcotics.
Narcotics? I doubt that poker is as addictive as cocaine, but even if it were, as a libertarian, I say, once I'm an adult, it ought to be my choice whether I want to gamble. Alex McFarland of the American Family Association says libertarians are just wrong about that. Why?
Well, gambling oftentimes is defended. People attempt to try and defend it by saying it's my money, it's just only me. But gambling touches other people.
Everything touches other people.
Oh, it does, and that's all the more incentive to act morally. Wherever gambling goes, domestic violence increases, substance abuse increases, suicides increase. The suicide capital of America is Las Vegas, Nevada. And so economically, spiritually, socially, there are a number of reasons that conservatives, and especially conservative Christians, as I am, would be against gambling.
But why can't individuals do what the heck we want? It's my money, my choice.
Well, let me talk about the bigger issue, which is morality. America was founded on belief in an objective, transcendent moral code. Jefferson called these self-evident truths. All men are endowed by their Creator, capital C, with certain inalienable rights: life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. The realization that our founders believed in a moral code, you can call it the Ten Commandments. That's why
I'm not getting it. Why can't I bet? I mean, a moral code means I have a choice to do the moral thing or not.
Because no man is an island. Our choices have a ripple effect and touch the lives of others. There are misconceptions about the odds of winning, misconceptions about the perceived benefits, misconceptions about...
It's my misconception. If I want to risk my money playing blackjack, but it's my choice.
We influence other people. I'll acknowledge the 800-pound elephant in the room. We have got to acknowledge God, that there's a God. Our founding fathers believed in God and a moral code. And that's what we've got to recover. So here's the thing. If you don't want to be a Christian, you don't have to be a Christian. If you want to be an atheist.
I'm free to be an atheist.
Of course. But don't destroy the milieu that gives you the freedom not to be a Christian safely. Do you see what I mean?
No. Because to me, my relationship with God is personal, and I only can make a moral choice if I'm free to gamble or not gamble. If you ban it, you make that choice for me.
So your coming to God is contingent on the freedom to gamble?
Or to choose God or not.
That doesn't follow at all. It's economically detrimental, it's socially detrimental, it's contrary to the message that we want to send to our children and their descendants, that wealth is built through
playing. I mean, some kids now learn math through playing poker.
Think about this. Of American youth 12 to 17, 80% have dabbled in gambling. 35% of all teens have gambled within the last 7 days. We're teaching our kids that money is not to be handled responsibly. Indebtedness is okay. It's not a good
message. I think kids playing poker learn to handle money responsibly. We agreed to disagree. Thank you, Alex McFarland.
Thank you, John.
Now, what do you think about this? On Twitter, you can use that hashtag T-Lot versus T-Cot. I know those terms sound weird. They were new to me, too. They stand for Top Libertarians on Twitter and Top Conservatives on Twitter. If you search for those hashtags, you can see what libertarians and conservatives are saying. Coming up, prostitution, gay marriage, immigration, the size of our military. The fight between libertarians and conservatives continues. I don't care who you marry. You want to marry someone of your own gender? Fine. And most libertarians say, fine. In fact, most of us don't see why government should be involved in marriage at all. It ought to be a private contract between consenting adults. Gay marriage is one area where libertarians and conservatives clearly differ. Here's some reaction from conservatives after the Supreme Court declared some restrictions on gay marriage unconstitutional.
It's a sad day for America.
Very sad day for the children of America. Those who are hurt the most, in my opinion, are the children of America. Because very clearly, every child in America deserves a mom and a dad.
Today's decisions are offensive on so many levels. They attack something that they have no jurisdiction over whatsoever, the foundational unit of our society.
Allowing gays to marry threatens that? I don't get it. I don't see how gays getting married would threaten my marriage. But here to educate me is Ryan Anderson, the author of What is Marriage? Man and Woman, a Defense. So a defense, it sounds like you're feeling under attack.
I think the family's been under attack for the past 40 or 50 years, and it's not unique to the question of same-sex relationships. No-fault divorce, premarital sex. out of wedlock childbearing. There are a whole host of problems. I think what we need to recognize as people in favor of limited government is that the family is the heart of civil society, and you can't have limited government without strong civil society. So the government tries to encourage a man and a woman to commit to each other permanently and exclusively as husband and wife, so that any children they create have a mother and a father.
And why can't government encourage two men or two women to do the same thing?
Well, it seems that once you get rid of the male-female aspect of marriage, you're left with no foundational reason for monogamy, exclusivity, or permanency.
What does one have to do with the other?
Well, the way that we got to the number 2 with monogamy is that it's one man and one woman who can unite in the type of act that can create new life, and every new life has one mother and one father. But once you say marriage is just about adult romance, marry the person you love, why not marry the people you love? And if marriage is just about adult romance, why should it be permanent rather than temporary? Once you take away from it the procreative aspect, that you're creating something that's generative.
But if you allow infertile people to marry and people who are too old to bear children to marry, so it's not just about childbearing.
It's not just about childbearing, but the fact of the matter is that every child is the product of the union of a man and a woman, and children do best when they're raised by the man and the woman who created them. And so government's interest here is really in protecting that child to one day grow up to be a self-sufficient, autonomous adult who's not relying on the state through welfare programs or...
But who's to say that two lesbians aren't going to do an even better job than a selfish man at raising a child?
Sure, we don't really have that many studies that would show one way or the other. What we do know is that every child deserves to have the man and the woman who created that child raise that child.
What about adopted children? What about people who get in vitro treatments? It has to be the man and woman who created that child?
We're not criminalizing any of these activities, but we don't want to incentivize any of these activities either. No one would suggest that we should just take children randomly from hospitals and assign them to parents. No, the ideal is that the mother and the father of that child take that child home. But when the mom and the dad are unable to do that, we recognize adoption as something that's necessary to make up for a lack. But no one would suggest that adoption is the ideal.
Do you have a problem with homosexuality itself? Is it a sin?
As a policy matter, I don't think that matters one way or the other. I mean, I think this is one of the interesting things about libertarians and conservatives. We can actually leave some of our moral convictions aside when considering what the public policy concerns are of the institution of marriage. What we're concerned about is when the baker or the florist or the photographer or the Christian adoption agency is coerced, penalized, shut down by the government for wanting to treat the union of a man and a woman on marriage in a way that's distinctive than the union of two men or two women. We've seen Catholic Charities adoption agencies forced out of finding homes for orphans because they wanted to find moms and dads for orphans. How is that live and let live?
Well, it's not, and libertarians would agree with you about that, not just for religious freedom, but if I open a business, I ought to get to serve anybody I want. And these headlines, judge orders a Colorado bakery, it must cater a same-sex wedding. I mean, I might boycott that bakery because I think they're narrow-minded, but if that's what they want to do, these other cases, a wedding photographer, florist, that's outrageous. And yet, when someone said they ought to have the right, the Arizona governor backed off. There's a new gay mafia policing America saying you can't even disagree with us.
It's amazing the thought crimes committed here. We should be able to voice our opinions without being penalized, especially by the government. If you think that photographer should take those pictures, you can not hire her to be your photographer. You don't have to have the government fine her.
Won't solve it here. Thank you, Ryan. Coming up, the libertarian-conservative divide on sex work, getting paid for sex. These legal prostitutes in Nevada say legal is better.
Here it's safe. We have a problem, the sheriff comes.
Brooke Taylor says sex work is like any other sales job.
I mean, we are entrepreneurs. We are independent contractors, just like any other business.
Sex is legal, and fornication's legal. Actually, there's still laws against it in some states, but they're not enforced. What's not legal in most of America is prostitution. So, to put it crudely, sex is okay, making money's okay, but sex for money is not. Why not? Radio host and Fox News contributor Monica Crowley has volunteered to explain it to me. So,
hi, John.
Explain.
Look, I understand the freedom argument, and I'm not averse to that argument, which you on the libertarian side make, that, look, this is a good and service, there's a demand, there's a supply for it, and we should just let the free market work. And I can appreciate that argument, but I think that the social cost is far too high, that legalized prostitution, decriminalizing prostitution, tears at the social fabric in a way that once that door is open, you can't restore. When you legalize prostitution, it's actually a gift to pimps, it's a gift to sex traffickers, and it's a gift to the sex industry.
Isn't the opposite true? Because if it's legal, you don't need a pimp.
Even where it's legal, you get an increase in hidden illegal and child prostitution as well.
Child prostitution...
It opens the door to a lot of darkness, John.
Again, I would say the opposite is true. Child prostitution thrives in the darkness, where things are secret, where things are legal. You don't have darkness.
Well, what we do know from studies, and I have a couple of them in front of me from the Journal of Trauma Practice, from another journal, Prostitution, Trafficking, and Traumatic Stress, is that actually it does lead to an increase in child prostitution. It also doesn't protect women, doesn't protect women's health, and it doesn't control the sex industry. It actually expands it.
I look at these countries where it's legal: Australia, Germany, Greece, Mexico, Holland, Switzerland. Illegal: China, Croatia, Egypt. It just seems civilization is on the side of legal sex work.
I would say that the United States is a special case, and I'll concede that point, because there has been a very puritanical strain that started with the founding of this country, but this country was also founded on Judeo-Christian morals and ethics, and I think that's one of the big things that comes into play here. Those views may change over time. We've seen views on gay marriage change, but at this very moment, the consensus is, and it's widespread, that that prostitution should remain illegal.
And what do you say to the women who I interviewed, for example, who say, look, this is my body. A boxer, a quarterback can use his body to make money. This is how I make money.
Well, boxers and quarterbacks are wearing clothes, number one.
And that makes all the difference?
Well, when they say it's my body, it should be my choice. I would argue with prostitution, it's not just your body, because you have a client who's paying for the service. You might have a third person involved, meaning the pimp, and so on. So you're involving more than one person. It's not just your body.
Share the happiness. So what?
The thing I think that makes sex a different issue from all the other things is that even if you're using protection and even if it's regulated, it's still the process that can lead to another life. And in that way, it's more sacred than, say, drug use and so on.
In one American state, Nevada, prostitution is legal, actually in 15 Nevada counties, but not in Las Vegas. I once interviewed some of the legal sex workers who work at a place called the Bunny Ranch and told them sex is supposed to be spontaneous, not a business deal. The State Department calls what you do inherently demeaning.
According to whom? Who made the sex laws?
It's just for money.
Right, well, don't you model for money? It's the same thing.
Sex is different. Sex is more intimate.
I choose to do this. This is what I want to do.
I assume you have no other options. You felt
I have several options. Before I did this, I had a nice paying job.
So why do you do this?
Because I want to.
Because they want to, which ought to be. We libertarians say once you're an adult, that ought to decide as long as you don't directly hurt somebody else.
So if women in America really feel compelled to express themselves that way and earn a living that way, they can certainly go there. But for the country, I think we have reached a national consensus where the United States, from a moral standpoint, does not want to condone this activity.
And you say thank God for that?
For now, yes. Indeed.
Thank you, Monica Crowley.
Thanks, Tom.
Coming up, my next guest is a conservative who wants a bigger military. I don't, and I worry about making new enemies. He doesn't. That's next. I want America to be safe. So do conservatives. We differ on what's the best way to do that. Some libertarians want less military spending, less involvement in other countries' problems. Some conservatives respond to that this way.
This strain of libertarianism that's going through both parties right now and making big headlines, I think is a very dangerous thought.
Some conservatives call libertarians isolationists, but I'm no isolationist. I'm glad Americans trade with other countries, trade both goods and people. It's great that we sell foreigners our music, our movies, our ideas. I want to participate in the world. Just don't want to run the world. And sometimes it seems like conservatives do. Though John Bolton, former U.S. ambassador to the UN, you probably call that an unfair description, but it seems that way. You want to police the world.
Well, I think most of what you've just said is completely irrelevant to foreign policy decision-making, certainly from a conservative point of view. I think the basis on which you start is defining what America's interests are and then trying to understand how best to protect them. You don't get up in the morning and say, what country's affairs can I get more involved in today? The issue is, what are our interests and how best we protect them?
All right, well, let's get specific then. You supported the Iraq War.
Correct.
You think we should use force to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon.
That's correct.
You would attack?
Yes, I've said that for a long time. The fact is, after having failed to use the potential peaceful means to stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons, we're now down to a situation where there are only two alternatives. Either Iran gets nuclear weapons, the most likely outcome at this point, or somebody uses force to stop them.
Right.
It's a terribly unpalatable choice. We didn't have to be there, but that's where we are. And I actually think, contrary to some, that the people of Iran are smart enough to understand that if we attack their nuclear weapons program, but also help overthrow the regime, that the people of Iran will be in a better place than they are today.
They won't hate us for killing their cousins and parents?
Some will inevitably, but I think this regime is very unpopular.
Was Vietnam a good intervention?
Well, I think obviously the way it played out, it was not. The issue, it's always easy after the fact to second guess the outcome. You could say, for example, to take a more contemporary example, that the war in Iraq didn't go well. But the overthrow of Saddam Hussein was done brilliantly. And I would do it again, knowing everything we know about the events after that.
What about the fact that we spend so much more than any other country, and that we have these troops all over? 50,000 in Japan, 40,000 soldiers in Germany, South Korea, almost 30,000. They freeload off America. We pay.
Well, actually, they do pay a considerable part of the basing expenses. I think it's a fair point that many allies do not bear their fair share of the cost. But let's be very clear. We're not doing this for them. We're doing it for us.
Well, how does it help us to have 30,000 soldiers in South Korea? South Korea could defend itself.
The fact is, when your enemies are overseas, sometimes the best place to be to defend against them is overseas.
Here are some of the things that people ask our military to do. Chase and kill terrorists. Train foreign militaries to chase terrorists, protect sea lanes, secure the internet, contain China, keep oil cheap, protect other countries from aggression, stop genocide, protecting innocent people, transform failed states into democracies, which you have said you don't support. I mean, the list is endless, which is part of the problem.
Well, that's your list, and with all due respect, that list is a dog's breakfast. That list, for example, did not include the concepts of deterrence and dissuasion, the notion that American strength convinces our adversaries not to challenge us in the first place. That's not a new concept. The Romans used to say, si vis pacem para bellum. If you want peace, prepare for war.
But they didn't stop China from doing what it's doing now in the East. They didn't stop Russia from attacking Ukraine.
Because our Navy is shrinking, and the Chinese, among others... Had it been
bigger, they wouldn't have done it?
The Russians, I think, looked at the Obama administration, concluded they saw weakness, and decided to exploit it.
And had we spent more money, they wouldn't have?
It's not a question of spending more money. It's having an overall policy that persuades the Russians that adventurism in Ukraine is going to be met with a response by the United States.
A previous president once said this: why quit our own to stand upon foreign ground? By interweaving our destiny with other countries, we entangle our peace with their ambition. This was our George Washington. Obviously, conditions have changed since then.
Stunning admission, conditions have changed.
But I don't see, aside from World War I, that our buildup or intervention has been all that successful. Some argue we won the Cold War because their economy was socialist. It caved in on itself and would have anyway.
Well, some believe that. I don't think that's the reality. What Washington was saying was that for a country like the United States in 1797, to have the option to stay out of European conflicts only made good sense. But it was also Washington that led the Continental Army in the American Revolution. There was a man who knew when to use force and knew how to use it effectively, unlike a number of other presidents I could think of since then.
On that note, thank you, John Bolton. Coming up, I'll argue with a conservative about immigration. And I'll steal Frederick Hayek's phrase to explain why I'm not a conservative. I know. I'm sorry. Last segment, I was too polite in my questions for John Bolton. It's just that national defense is not my specialty, so I didn't push him very hard. But next time, I'll push harder, and I won't hold back with our next guest. The first time I interviewed Lou Dobbs, I gave him a hard time for criticizing outsourcing and free trade.
This country cannot even clothe itself. 96% of our apparel is imported.
But that's okay. We have more choices for less money.
When was the last time you bought a suit of clothes? Because if your prices went down, I would be shocked.
Be shocked then. Here's the Labor Department's price index for clothing. It's gone down and down.
Not surprisingly, Dobbs didn't like what I'd said about him. On his radio show, he said this about me.
What a self-important ass. You know, he is just unbelievable. He doesn't understand basic economics. He's just a silly little, trick waiting to do some sort of libertarian flip. I mean, he's just unbelievable. I just can't wait to, till he starts blowing bubbles on the air. That's just about all he's equipped to do.
And here we are together in our new job having a discourse. Isn't Fox great? Isn't America great that we can debate?
Yes to both of those, and isn't John Stossel great to have a sense of humor that carries over so many decades? It's great to work with you, and I must have been a little exercised at the moment. I don't know what about. I'm sure it was entirely unjustified.
Okay, I won that one then. So let's go to.
Well, I didn't know you were going to keep score, so now we'll have to play. Wait a minute, what is this? This is
we're going to talk about immigration.
This looks combative.
This is combative because I think we disagree on immigration. How would you protect the border? You want?
How would I protect
more
the border?
Policing of the border?
Oh, here's the way I would start. I would have a meeting between two presidents, the presidents of Mexico and the United States. They would meet to find out exactly what is the plan of Mexico for the population of America. Exactly whom do you want to be citizens of our country, and we will do as we have before. We will simply bow down before you, Mexico, and allow you to do whatever you wish.
What do you mean?
I mean, the Mexican government is deciding who comes into our country. They are exporting just about 10% of their population
does
into the
the
United
government
States.
decide? Aren't these individuals who are sneaking in?
Oh, wait, no, they're not sneaking in. No. You oppose government being involved. Here. You don't want it to be the U.S. government because you're libertarian. Therefore, we bow down and we let Mexico decide what our immigration policy is. And you call that libertarian freedom.
Well, some of it. Just to be clear, this libertarian would say we need borders and we need border protection now because people want to come in here and murder us, and because we have a welfare state and some will come into freeload. There was a time we would have said open immigration, let goods and people cross borders.
About 1870 would have been about right.
Are immigrants in general good for America?
Immigrants are great for America. But America is great for immigrants. And America is so great that we have a government, a society that makes decisions about who we want to work in this country. Come to our country, we will warmly embrace you. We just want a couple of things. Don't change our society. Don't demand we speak your language. Let us, if we may, help you speak ours.
How about a path to let them become legal?
How about this? A path that acknowledges their responsibilities to become citizens and to put them in a position behind everyone who has been in that legal line.
So they'd have to leave the country and apply from scratch.
I know, that sounds so harsh and inhuman. It's almost torture, isn't it?
It sounds impractical.
Impractical. Now impractical becomes the standard.
Lou just published a new book called Border War. It's fiction. A thriller, but a lead character is TV host Ted Dempsey, and he sure sounds like you talking about you, Lou.
Oh, I never do that.
Left and right-wingers both tried to shut him up on illegal immigration, trying to paint Dempsey as an economic isolationist, a protectionist, a racist.
My goodness.
That's kind of what's happened when you were at CNN. This happened to you?
They tell me. The fact of the matter is that it is fiction. There's a certain composite, and when you mentioned that old place, you were at an old place, I remember.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, I'm in such a happy new place. I much prefer.
One section of his new book says Border Patrol agents are assigned an impossible job, informed they wouldn't be allowed to actually secure the border, and told not to apprehend too many undocumented people or risk their careers if they tried.
Update.
Really?
Now they're being told not to apprehend them at all. Internal enforcement of immigration laws has been suspended by this administration.
Well, I hear they're deporting more people than Bush did.
Do you really? They've cooked the books, and that in fact they acknowledged their numbers were phony.
But they're still deporting people.
Well, you got me there.
Thank you, Lou Dobbs. I used to be a liberal, but then I saw the light, I became libertarian. I did not become a conservative for the same reason this Nobel Prize winner gave in his book, The Constitution of Liberty. A fundamental trait of a conservative is fear of change, a timid distrust of the new, an inclination to use the powers of government to prevent change. Bad idea. Lou says it's unfair, but bad idea. I'll explain when we come back.
Just so it's fair. And so...
Years ago, I was in high school. The philosopher F.A. Hayek wrote an essay entitled, Why I Am Not a Conservative. It's the postscript to his great book, The Constitution of Liberty. Hayek said, the conservative position rests on the belief that there are recognizably superior persons whose standards and values ought to be protected. The conservative regards it as his mission to civilize others, not by voluntary and unhampered intercourse, but by bringing them the blessings of efficient government. Blessings was sarcasm. As usual, Hayek was on to something. It took me 30 years to realize it, but now I'm a libertarian, and I say everyone ought to be able to do anything that's peaceful. I own my own body, and I should be allowed to take drugs, gamble, pay for sex, do self-destructive things, immoral things, anything as long as I don't directly harm someone else. Conservatives who don't like what I do have every right to tell me that I'm a jerk, to picket my activities, to boycott me, to refuse to hire me or embarrass me. Society's influence, wrote John Stuart Mill, practices a social tyranny more formidable than any kinds of political persuasion, since it leaves fewer means of escape, penetrating more deeply into the details of life. So America benefits when conservatives speak out against immoral behavior. Conservative arguments make people think about what's moral and sometimes shame us into being better people. But shaming's one thing, force of law another. Using law means people with guns demand that everyone behave the way the majority thinks they should. Government should avoid using that power because it has nasty unintended side effects. Prohibition, by driving activities underground into black markets, causes crime. It increases secrecy, deceit, even violence in other countries. In a free society, moral and social pressure, persuasion, is better than government force. But many people tell me that's not enough. This man says he's not a libertarian because libertarians
is just a little bit too free. We need discipline. We need discipline. The government's job is to supply discipline for the people, law and order.
But wait a second. I'm for law and order. Libertarians support laws against robbing and killing people, physically harming others. Most libertarians also support laws against fraud and pollution. We want order. We just want a limit on government power. Libertarianism, or as it was called in 1776, liberalism, was a reaction against monarchy and repressive religion. The Declaration of Independence said we individuals have unalienable rights. That meant that even if I disagreed with your choices, the state must not take your choices away. If you want to bet on the Stanley Cup, burn a flag, or sell your kidney, that ought to be your choice. Now, Hayek also wrote, one of the fundamental traits of the conservative is fear of change, a timid distrust of the new. Conservatives use the powers of government to prevent change. They lack faith in spontaneous forces of adjustment. This is difficult to reconcile with the preservation of liberty. It is. And yet, when I became libertarian, I was struck by the different reactions I got from liberals versus conservatives. Conservatives were willing to debate me. Even those who disagreed with my ideas welcomed me at conferences or on their radio shows. By contrast, supposedly open-minded liberals wanted nothing to do with me. I thought I'd have a shot at a fair debate with one who just started hosting a radio show. He was a smart guy, went to Harvard. Surely he would see the damage our giant welfare state causes. Plus, our kids were in school together. We'd gone to the same birthday parties. I was sure he'd debate me the way I argued with conservatives tonight. Nope, wrong. He screamed at me. The radio host was this man.
I'm Al Franken. An end to the right-wing dominance of talk radio, the beginning of a battle for truth, a battle for justice, a battle indeed for America itself, not to be grandiose.
Oh, please, pretty grandiose. Now he's Senator Franken. He wouldn't debate me. He just yelled. My point is that I never found much openness in the liberal media. That's why I left ABC and happily came here, where liberals and conservatives are eager to debate. That's our show. See you next week.